Welcome to the Bitcoin Reformation podcast. We're three pastors who love the gospel, the Reformation, and have recently become interested in Bitcoin. We want to invite you into a conversation with us. We're not financial advisors, and nothing that we're going to say on this show today or ever should be taken as financial advice. We don't promise any kind of returns. We simply want to study this new technology of Bitcoin alongside of you, invite you into the conversation, and welcome you into how we're thinking about it as we ourselves study Bitcoin. So, welcome to the show. And David, take it away and introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. My name is David. I live with my wife and our four children in Southern California. Not so much palm trees. You gotta go uphill into the mountains a little bit, and we're in kind of pine tree territory. We're 4 years new here to Southern California. But as Ben said, well, I added I'm a husband. I'm a father. Had actively in church settings been a church pastor for 16 years as an associate pastor and then a sole pastor in Michigan. And now I work for a nonprofit organization based out of Southern California here. So that's me real quick. Maybe we'll keep going around the horn and share a little bit later how we all got into Bitcoin, what that journey looked like. So I think I'll pass it on then to Jared.
Thanks, David. Good to be here. I'm Jared Townley, serve out in Western Pennsylvania as an associate here. Been here almost for 4 years, coming up in June of 2024. Two kids and my wife. I think that's pretty much it. So
Awesome. And I'm Ben Haupt. I have been podcasting for a good bit. I work at Concordia Seminary here in St. Louis, married to my wife, Selena, and we have two teenage boys, Aiden and Noah. And all three of us graduated from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis a few years apart. David and I actually went to high school together way back in the day in good old Fort Wayne. And Jared, I got to know when he was a student here. While I was, I think first class was Ham 1, right? Introduction to Preaching.
and then pastoral leadership during that winter immersion.
Fun times. So let's talk a little bit about how we got into Bitcoin, because other than maybe our a parent or a sibling or somebody that's very close to us that maybe knows a little bit about that, we do want to invite them in, but we want to begin to inviting friends into this conversation. So, David, tell us a little bit about how you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah, my story looks like this. Like so many Americans, I left higher education as a student, that is. And so for me, that was a 4-year undergrad and then 4 years, just like both of you, at this Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, Missouri. So that was a 4-year program, 2 years residence. Typically year 3, you're off doing an internship at a church. I was in Chicago for that, back for year 4. And then they have a newly minted pastor on their hands and they send you out. So after all that education and getting married in the midst of that, my wife having her own undergrad degree, we had a fair amount of student debt. So we have a fair amount of student debt. I mean, there's things to celebrate there. We were, let's say, less than national averages, I suppose, but it doesn't seem to matter. Any amount of student debt is just something that hangs around your neck. And we felt that, and it took us nearly the full 15 years to get rid of that debt. We were able to pay off my wife's at an accelerated pace, hers a little bit earlier, and then mine just accelerated by a day or two. But if you think of that, so probably 18 coming out of high school, 22 or so coming out of undergrad, and now 26 coming out of seminary. That's not only that many more years of education, it's that many years lost to the marketplace and a paycheck whereby to pay things down. And so then you add a 14-year window to it, and you can imagine then 14, 15-year window, basically, and now I'm I'm pushing 40 or right at 40. We're finally getting rid of those bills. And on top of that, been a pastor. I don't know if our listeners will know this, but pastors, at least in our church body, you can't think televangelist here. Pastors oftentimes are paid a living wage, sometimes marginally less, right? There's a bit of scraping by. Pastors' families are frugal. Sometimes the wife works outside of the home. Not so with us. Megan taught some piano here and there. She did have a few dollars coming in from time to time, but we had 4 kids early on. We have an active household, and she's not just being mom to the kids, but for our household economy, I'm working and I'm helping when home, and she's mom. So finally, by 40, suddenly we have a few extra dollars. And the confession here is hadn't meaningfully at all saved for retirement outside of the pastor pension that we're paying into. And that's maybe a whole other thing, but I'm not talking an active 401k, which is to say monies that I invest into and maybe my employer invest into, but ultimately they're my monies from the get-go. No, we're paying into a pastor pension, which is meaning probably my dollars today are helping some retiree today. And my promised future is dependent on an organizational future. It seems scary to me, right? And you could see this, sure, in pastor world, but there's other pensions in other places. However, some of those other pensions in other places aren't backed by a church organization, but maybe they're backed by a state. That doesn't mean that bad things can't happen in those pensions, but anyways, so in a nutshell, 40 years old, having meaningfully saved for retirement. And I start looking around, and it had been nearly a decade of exuberance in the stock market, and I couldn't make sense as to why. All right, I didn't feel like jumping into stocks because it felt like maybe I knew enough that you want to whatever it is you invest in, if you can get in low and slowly sock away and see something grow, that's better than buying at the exuberant top and then immediately riding your investment to the bottom. So I look around, guys, and suddenly I'm hearing about blockchain technology and a variety of cryptocurrencies, not just a singular one. And at that time, I did my first investment. So this is more than 5 years ago now. It was dabbling. In some ways, it's been nothing but dabbling since, although consistent amount of dollars dabbling forward. It's never been grand investments, but I dabbled. I spread across a variety of coins. It was probably like Litecoin, XRP. Who knows? Our hearers either know these or they don't. You do not need to go look these up. But one of those coins that I invested into was, I knew enough to know that it was like the grandfather of them all. It was the OG, and that would be Bitcoin. But I didn't know anything that would demarcate it from the others. So that for me is just literally the genesis of it. I then promptly in the next year and a half did what a lot of people do. I essentially started kind of day trading a little bit between these coins, and I incurred on my head more tax dollars than upside. I really did. And probably that pain point of bumping into the tax code, short-term or even long-term capital gains, then started driving me towards educating myself further. What is different from these coins? And we can get into that later. That's a short-term story. The longer story then that only began happening after that is really then a lot of the financial melee that we're in now. Prices of consumer goods going up, housing, going up. Everything in terms of price points going up, up, up. And meanwhile, no good savings vehicles around, savings vehicles with low interest rates, or even if they have an interest rate, they can't keep up with inflation. So for me, it was a little bit backwards of, I think, how we will talk about this with our hearers going forward. But it began just dabbling in this new thing, trying to find some place where I could get purchase, my family could get purchase in terms of getting a leg up towards retirement. And I can park it right there because you guys have been generous listening to that. So that's my story. Let's send it around the horn again.
It's funny, David. I think there's a lot of similarities in our story that maybe I didn't even know beforehand. So that's cool to hear it that way again. Very similar to you. We came out of seminary. I came out of seminary with no debt. Thankfully, that's like an act of God. Truly believe that. And yet, my wife came out of school as an occupational therapist with a lot of debt. And we could spend a lot of time about even the way in which she will tell you she feels like no one really told her what she was doing and taking out these massive loans to live on, to do schooling. Like she looks back on it and says, how come nobody told me that like this was going to be something I had to repay and that there's going to be interest on this thing? Whole different side topic. But coming out of school with that sort of debt, wanting to be a good husband, wanting to lead my family well, now having 2 kids too. It started all though with just a text from my brother, which is a strange thing. I'm pretty sure it was something like hey, have you ever heard of Bitcoin? That it's going up a lot. And that I blame or I say is a good thing that happened to me, however you want to look at it. But that got me down the what is this thing? Oh boy, it's gonna maybe be able to make me have a little bit more dollars in my bank account, or be able to buy more things, or pay off these loans faster. That's cool. I can get on board with that. And so, like you, I think I dabbled first, not just in one, but in a couple of those cryptocurrencies that we can talk about later too. But I found myself, I think, and maybe as a pastor, I can say I need to confess that I found myself looking to something like Bitcoin to be my financial savior in a way, right? That it was hey, if I do this, I'm going to know that it's going to save me and I'm going to have a leg up on everybody else. And that was the sort of lure that brought me in. But I can say now, as having done and spent lots and lots and lots and lots of hours and time learning and reading and just thinking about this stuff, that even though I might have come for such a selfish and self-centered reason, that is not the only reason I'm still here. And I would say that's not why we are here either, right? That is so much more than just it goes up in dollar value in US dollar terms. It's such a deeper thing that keeps me here. So that's how I got started and why I think I'm sticking around today.
Yeah, that's good. So in some ways, my story starts very similar, and lots of similarities too. David said it. We're all Lutheran pastors, and we didn't go into this vocation to make gobs of money, but pretty quickly you realize, wow, stuff costs a lot of money, and it's expensive to have kids. It's expensive to once you start thinking about long-term retirement, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, we had our first call was in Boca Raton, Florida. It was a fantastic congregation, and yet the cost of living there was just outrageous, and that wasn't anything that the congregation had any control over. But we know what it means to pinch pennies, big time. To even wonder how are we going to pay for next month's rent. But that experience, I think, once we moved to Second Call to Georgia, we started in right as we were making the move, we started into Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, and my wife comes from a very thrifty family, and they took savings and storing away cash very seriously, even though my wife does not come from a family with gobs and gobs of money, but they're very good money managers. Um, and and so we kind of took to Dave Ramsey's philosophy, like pay off debt, and then start investing a little bit in stock market savings, nest egg. And I was doing that, and I will say, we were starting to put a little bit of money into our kids' 529 plans for college, and we were socking away a little bit into a 403b, and I was pretty bored with it. It was you'd put money in, and then you'd probably see it go down a little bit. I mean, this was in the 2008 to 2015 kind of era, and the stock market was not a great place to be in. That's, for a lot of us, our kind of entryway into watching stocks. But it was very boring. And Ramsey thought that you could probably get like 10 to 15%, or no, 10%, maybe at best, probably more conservative to think like 7%. And man, I thought that's so boring. It's like watching paint dry. And then, Jared, you said that it was your brother that got you into it. My brother contacted me, and he's got a PhD from Cornell. He's a super smart guy, and so I listened to him when he says, "Hey, you should pay attention to this." And so he told me about this Bitcoin thing, and I mean, I had heard that it had been used in this Silk Road online as a tool to sell drugs and on the black market, and it sounded kind of shady acres to me. Mount Gox, this one of these first exchanges, had gone bankrupt or had been hacked, and I was kind of skeptical of it. But what my brother told me is, hey, look, here's the thing that makes Bitcoin not just kind of funny internet money, but something real. He said it takes electricity in order to mine it. And I did not know at all what that meant. But he said there's a real commodity that's going into Bitcoin, and it's electricity. And electricity isn't free for anybody unless you own like a power plant or hydroelectric dam or something. So with that, he said this is a real thing. People are spending lots of money to mine this Bitcoin, and you should check it out. And so I started looking into it. Looked into this exchange called Coinbase. Decided, you know what? Why not? Why not throw just a little bit of money? My wife and I, every once in a while, we're not big gamblers. We see it more as like entertainment. So maybe some Christians would be scandalized by this, but Lutherans have a pretty easy going view of this kind of stuff. It's I think gambling can be very, very destructive for some people, especially if they're very, very addictive personalities. But we've always had the mindset like, hey, if you're going on a cruise, or hey, if you're going to be in Vegas, take a very specific set amount and say, this is just kind of for fun, throw it to the wind. It's not like we're taking money out of our kids' college account, or saying, hey, maybe we'll see if we can double our rent money. It was never anything like that. It was taking just a little bit and saying, what if we just throw this into Bitcoin and see what happens? I mean, not much different than picking an AT&T stock, or picking Walmart, or trying to pick the next Amazon or Google or whatever. It's like, okay, I'll just throw a little money at Bitcoin. And boy, it's gone from there to the place where I've almost become skeptical of investing money in other vehicles, because frankly, the stock market is losing me money compared to my small Bitcoin investments have gone up so much faster. So That's kind of how I got into it, and I dabbled with cryptocurrencies, other currencies as well, and kind of have come back around to Bitcoin. Um,
And I
yeah,
think early on, though we won't in this episode, I think really get into the intricacies and the full fundamentals of Bitcoin. But there's this thing with Bitcoin. Anytime the number goes up, they call it NGU technology, number go up technology. There is, admittedly, this happens. In fact, in these last 3 months, number has gone up. Friends start texting you, maybe calling. Google searches are up because of number going up. So, and we're not immune to that. I don't think any of the three of us, based on our conversations, those sorts of things can catch our attention. But I love this story from your brother that he didn't just come to you with NGU technology. He talked about electricity, a real world costly input,
yep.
and we'll have to talk about that more. But that is something really early on. I would like to amplify what you said, which is I now feel like the Vegas bet, which is to say the house normally wins, right? I feel like the Vegas bet is with a lot of other things, way more than I feel that about Bitcoin. And this is the thing I would want to add to that. And it's not simply because I can look in the rearview mirror and say number has gone up in the last 3 months, but rather I've had, along with you two gentlemen, the three of us, and certainly more still, high conviction that this is a wise place to invest, and the number will go up, but it's not just based on speculation. It's not just based on froth. Not that this market is immune from those things, but it's based on some real fundamentals as to what Bitcoin is. And it's a deep rabbit hole. It's a fun rabbit hole to jump down. And I think it's something over the course of our conversation together, among other things. I love some of the conversations so far. We want this for our children, our loved ones, our neighbors. I mean, our convictions at that level, right? That we think there's a safety net. There's something very solid here for the help of people we know and love in life going forward, to both preserve wealth and even possibly increase wealth. So we're looking forward to that. But it is premised on the fundamentals of what Bitcoin is. And those fundamentals then are tied with number go up, right? And we can come up with some counter examples where there's not good fundamentals, but number goes up. And why does number go up? Because Elon Musk name drops a particular coin, right?
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, in the next 5 days, you can ride that wave. You're playing a game now. Can you get off the top of that wave, or will you wait too long and crash down to where you were and below? So all of that is going on. But I heard that from you, Ben, and I'd only want to amplify it.
Yeah, I think where we want to go next. I think very naturally we're all skeptical, right? We have a lot of skepticism. I think especially living post the 2008 crisis, and it seems like it's just been one crisis after another. After that, the pandemic and the government giving all this money, but I think especially Gen X and millennials are pretty skeptical. Is there something that I can invest in which I can trust that there's no funny business going on behind the scenes, right? And I think that skepticism kind of points to this big problem that the three of us have talked about, a bunch of problems in how our modern world works, how money works. Jared, you were talking a little bit about right before we signed on. Why would somebody even listen to this or watch this? Do you want to share just a little bit of that conversation? Because I think that this is kind of our our first episode, we're trying to tee it up for the person that would join us in our skepticism and say, look, David, Jared, Ben, I'll watch this because I like you guys or I know you or something like that. But why should I at all be interested?
I think a helpful place to start is we're concerned about people being stewards of what God's given them to, right? And so there is a sense in which everything we have, not just the money, right, is a thing that God's given us to steward. But one of the things that I think all of us think about when it comes to stewardship is the gifts of resources, money, all those sort of things. And so our first natural instinct, I think, is that protection, right? So if God has given me this gift, I want to put it in a piece of bubble wrap and keep it safe because it's a gift and I want to make sure that it doesn't get broken, that I don't lose it, that I take care of it. And so for me, when I think about what Bitcoin is and what it offers to people, is it offers people a way to steward their gift of money from God in a way that helps protect them from what maybe you don't even know about too. And so we could talk a lot about this, but I would say that there is a sense in which Bitcoin protects you, protects your finances, protects your savings from the government, from money, the inflation of the money supply, right? So the amount of dollars that are in our system, right? Everybody holds a certain amount in their bank account. The more that there are of those, the more that are made and produced, then make the ones that you hold worth less unless you're adding at the same exact rate as the person who is making those dollars. And so what Bitcoin does is it helps you protect that. So I want to show you a tool here and try and share my screen here. All right, good. Everybody see that? Cool. So this is something that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics actually puts out and allows you to see, right? So you can go on and do this on your own. And what it does is it takes the consumer price index, the inflation calculator that our government uses to track how much prices are going up. You probably have heard about this in the news all the time, talking about 3%, 6, 9% inflation, all those sort of things. And what it does is it lets you put in a dollar amount in a month, in a year, and then you hit calculate, and it's going to punch out a number of what that buying power is worth or should be worth now. So let's say, I don't know, let's go 2008, right? And let's say we'll just do $100, right? Here we go. Come on. Oh, whoops. It's on the right side. Okay. So $100. If I hit calculate here, so that $100 then theoretically has the same buying power now as $147. Now, that sounds really good. That sounds really great. But here's the problem. Uh, if if you haven't actually gained your cash, that dollar value in your bank account, then now your dollars are almost worth half as much, right? If it's 100 and 150, that's a $50 difference. And so when we think about what problem Bitcoin solves, Bitcoin's going to help me keep up with that number. It's going to help me take those dollars that I'm trying to save for the future because I want to be able to, save my school and my church, someday should we need finances. That's going to help me be able to send my kids to college maybe or put a nice big down payment on a house. But I can't do that in today's day and age the way things are currently. And so this is going to help me not necessarily escape, but it's going to be a tool that I can use to actually keep up with that CPI, that inflation, but even exceed it too. And so when you think about how is this, you could get caught up that skepticism is real. You could say, well, it's scary. It's so new to me. But I would push you, try and look at it like just another tool, right? Just like your phone that you use to call people, just like the computer you use to check your email. They're tools that you use to do something. And Bitcoin is a specific tool Now, is it strange? Is it different than anything else that we've ever seen in our life? Absolutely. And we're going to talk all about that. But at the end of the day, it's just a tool, just like anything else that you use, but it's a tool with specific purposes. So I really hope that as people are with us as we dive into these sort of things, that they see that, but that then they're sort of willing to take that step and say, I can use this tool too, because it's not just for us three here, right? It's for your friends. It's for your enemies, as we say in the Bitcoin world, money for enemies. It's for the people down the street. It's for every single person because of the way it is, because of the tool it is, and the type of tool that it is. So that's my hope for us.
I think that's so helpful because so Dave Ramsey taught us keep an emergency fund in the bank and put some dollars away, 3 to 6 months of 3 to 6 months of your salary. But if you put that in dollars in a bank account, and most banks, at best you're going to get 4 or 5% return now, but for well over a decade, it was get zero back. But even if you're getting the 4 or 5% back, you're still going to not escape inflation, and so that those dollars that you have sitting in a bank account, as good as it feels to see, hey, I have some dollars sitting in the bank account. We have a nest egg. The problem is that those dollars are worth less and less and less, and can buy less and less and less. So, David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Jared, I love the idea of it being a tool. I mean, and the tool metaphor, and it may be even more than a metaphor in this case. It actually is a tool, but I can think of it as a metaphor. And tools progress. I have an old antique fence post auger. I got it. Speaking of Fort Wayne, Ben, I don't know, probably post high school, out with buddies. We find an estate sale. I see this cool, incredible old tool. I mean, it's got a belly plate where you literally belly up to this tool. You're going to push forward with your belly, right?
Holy cow.
The bit goes to the fence post, and then it's got a hand crank. Maybe some of you saw that growing up, like sort of a hand crank for eggs, right? In the utensil drawer, but it's got a hand crank. It's absolutely analog. It's absolutely beautiful. Have I ever used it? Answer, no. I mean, I've had plenty of projects where I've used auger bits and bored sizable holes, many of them. I've never used that tool because I've got a better tool. So part of the implication here isn't just that Bitcoin is a tool, but that it's time for this tool. It's a needed tool because the other tool that we have been using, which is the US dollar, and admittedly we've used this so long and so widely, we don't think of it as a tool. It feels very intuitive to us. We probably haven't. Many of us, at least, I hadn't until these last years asked many questions about the tool. Well, it turns out this tool has a problem right now. Talking with my own children, we see prices go up around us, and it's easy for that to be the narrative. Prices are going up. Prices are going up. And then we can scapegoat the problem on other people. Prices are going up, and those gosh darn organizations with their shrinkflation, we're going to legislate stopping shrinkflation. Well, shrinkflation's been around for more than 100 years. I'm told, hey, there's our Pennsylvania guy, Jared. If you've been to the Hershey Museum, right? They used to have the nickel candy bar, and it, for decades, grew and shrank with the economy, this nickel bar, right? So shrinkflation, nothing new. But we're saying here, what we believe to our core is that there is an issue. There's a problem with our tool of the US dollar. And what is that problem? It's not so much that prices of things out there are going up, but it's that the value, as you showed, Jared, taking us to the site, talking us through the numbers, the purchasing power, therefore the value, the stored value of every dollar is decreasing. And we even have an explanation why. There's many complicated factors to it, but a base explanation to that is a growing money supply. And you hear people say, if you have more dollars chasing the same number of goods, at least relatively speaking, then the price of those goods will go up. And I think that's very graspable by us. And so what have we had since 2020? Now under presidents from both sides of the aisle, we've had a massive increase in the number of US dollars circulating out in the wild. And how does that come down to us, the consumer? It comes down to us and what looks like rising prices, but in fact is a dollar that we're trying to store up for a rainy day. We're trying to store up to bless those around us. But this dollar is leaky, right? Or to put as one gentleman, Michael Saylor, says, it's a melting ice cube. And so as much as you got three guys here passionate about Bitcoin, we see it as a better tool. I think I can say this. I'm looking forward to you guys responding to it. A better tool to this other tool that we've had for so long that wasn't necessarily bad, but how it's been manipulated really in these last years is causing havoc in the world around us. And so we see a problem, we see a solution. So that'd be what I'd pose to our listeners. Are you interested in investigating whether there is a problem, whether you agree with that? And then if you've named a problem, that does not make a proposed solution automatically wise or good. We tend to think that Bitcoin is both wise and good, but you don't make that leap based on us saying so. Are you curious now, having investigated the problem, are you curious to look around you and say, are there solutions out there? Or as you said, Jared, is there a better tool for me and my family to serve my family so that we can be taken care of? And then, that can go out from there. If we're taken care of, we can take care of loved ones and neighbors and communities.
So helpful. I want to bring kind of a different angle. So this is not a commercial, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I want to share just for a second this book, Hans-Joachim Evant on Church and Society. It's the first book that I have published. It again, not a commercial, and here's why. It's very expensive. I'm hopeful that down the road, T&T Clark will be excited to put this out in a paperback so that regular folks can pick it up for like $20 rather than, I think it's $140 right now in hardcover, which is intended for libraries. And I will say that I do not make a single cent off of any of the books sold. All of the money, all the proceeds of the book go to the Hans-Joachim Evant Foundation in Germany, which exists to study this guy, Evant. So let me tell you a little bit about Evant and the problem that he saw. He lived in the 30s in Germany, and as you can imagine, he watched Adolf Hitler come to power, and he was very, very, very concerned for three things, what he called the three estates. He saw problems in all three of them. The church being an estate, this institution maybe is another word that we would use. So the church, the state itself, government is an estate or an institution. And then third that he talks about, sometimes people refer to the third one as family, but Evant said that the problem was really in another estate that kind of rises out of the family, which is the society. And Evant was concerned that there were problems in all three estates, and he wanted to bring a word from outside of those three estates to work on them. He was very interested in how the estates could relate to one another, but Evant was particularly interested in the gospel of Jesus Christ as the kingdom of God that comes from the outside and begins to work on this institution that exists. And Evant points back to the Reformation, where there were these three estates. And Luther, Evant was a Luther scholar, Luther was pointing out problems in the estates. Luther saw big problems in the estate of the church. He writes the 95 Theses. Luther sees problems with the government. And he notices especially that church and state are like bound together, and there's a lot of abuses. So Luther was interested in how the gospel, how the word of God, how the kingdom of God breaks these estates open and reforms them from the outside in. So we're calling this the Bitcoin Reformation podcast. I think partially because we're so interested in how this thing that came from the outside in, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, sins forgiven because of the crucifixion and death and resurrection of Jesus. That news coming in, it kind of stirs up these estates and helps them to become again helpful and useful. The Reformation was not about destroying institutions. It wasn't about anarchy. In some ways, I think Bitcoin it's not the gospel. Jared, you said that a while back, and we on this podcast firmly stand by that Bitcoin is not the gospel. Bitcoin will not save us. It doesn't forgive sins. But sort of like the gospel came into these three estates and started to reform them, I think in some ways Bitcoin is stepping into a scenario where these three estates have lots of problems. I mean, if you want to talk about problems, how's the government going? How are you feeling about the election that's coming up? How's society going? How are you feeling about the state of society? Even I love the church, but how's the estate? How's the institution of church doing? I think that Bitcoin comes in, and in some ways, it's this external, outside force that kind of helps to reorient some things. So I don't know. That was a long discursus. Don't go out and buy the book.
Oh, I like it. That's the hook.
I think it's really helpful to think about it as sort of to the way that the Reformation 500 years ago, right, has sort of rippled down, right? And it took time. Sure, there were things that were pretty immediate, pretty quick, right? But that, in a sense, we're still living in the effects of the Reformation today, 500 plus years later. And Bitcoin is going to be the same way, I think, that, even us in 2024, Bitcoin hasn't even been here for 20 years yet. And so 500 years from now, I have no idea what it's going to be like, but I can guarantee it. It's going to keep rippling down and changing things, however long they resist, however long they don't want that change to happen. It's going to keep pushing on it, keep working on it, and eventually things are going to change that, we can't even anticipate today.
Yeah, I love the Reformation angle. Because it suggests things off kilter, right? Something off of its foundation, wanting to bring back to a foundation. I like Reformation more than revolution as well, because it suggests, at least to me, I've done some thinking about this, what I'll call a received world, that I'm here but for a time. I receive much from those who came before me, and the very creation all of us have received from one who created it before us. Revolutions can tend to be, I don't know that they necessarily have to be, but can tend to be godless, can tend to be, I see a demagogue, I see idolatry over there. I'll be a better version of that. And so I will offer myself up and this idea and this powerful movement. Reformation seems to safeguard maybe at times from some of that. Not to say that in the course of human history, revolutions have not been needed. But in all these cases, as much as I've already suggested, I think that the tool of the U.S. dollar is in trouble right now. Maybe you could call it sick. I've said leaky or melting. As much as all that's true, there's places I won't go with that. I'm not going to go and say, I'm neither going to say capitalism is the only way, but you're not going to hear me decry capitalism. In fact, when people do decry capitalism, as much as I can tell, what they're actually decrying is the ill effects of a broken tool, which is to say that the dollar at its base itself. So this idea of reformation, I think, is really exciting for the three of us, and hopefully some band of listeners who will join us in conversation going forward. Maybe that band will grow because it does connect with both the gospel of Jesus Christ, that precisely God sent into the world his son, that we would not get that which we deserve, right? And we receive so much more out of his grace. So mercy and grace on account of his death and resurrection, as you said, a God who is living and active, who has given his son from the outside in, that word from the outside in. I love that as well, Ben. So that's true. And yet amongst our neighbors, we also don't have to sit around and watch the world fall apart around us. And so there's individual topics we might address. We might all have sort of our pet project politically that when we hear about it, our blood pressure goes up. Maybe we become annoyed or excited. All that might be true. And I don't think we're going to precisely go into those, quite frankly, at least many of those. We believe that there's something else that we all share, which is, again, this tool. And again, it's sick, it's melting or degrading. And we need a reformation. Whether we knew we needed it or not, we need a reformation. And here is a proposed solution. So one other way to put it, in a world, this is one reason why I've enjoyed, again, the Bitcoin rabbit hole, learning about it, engaging it in a world. And I think many listeners, I'd be curious how this resonates with you guys, and maybe someday we'll hear from some listeners, in a world where so much is being torn down, right? Here is something that is actually being meaningfully built up by a variety of people, and they're doing it. It's an interesting one. Are they doing it selfishly? Well, yeah, probably. And it turns out even within my job today, I'm pretty selfish. I don't do it for free, right? Most of us work some jobs, at least a good portion of our lives, for a paycheck. Is that job selfish? Well, in that respect, I suppose it is. But in another respect, we're always serving our neighbors through our vocations. Well, here I see people saying there is this thing. We'll have to get into the history of it another time. It's 15-year history, pretty new, but there's this thing called Bitcoin. It's both a network and it's kind of the coin itself that promises to better serve my neighbors, even as it promises to better serve me and my own. It promises to take that which has fallen off of its foundation and have the ability to restore it, at least in part. And that becomes very thrilling. It becomes, kind of congruent with us when we see a God who comes, he sees a problem and he comes our way in Christ to solve it. And that's honestly the big problem. But now in this world, in this life, there are problems still of significant magnitude, certainly smaller than the life and salvation of the world, but that we now are called to be neighbors to each other and to others as well. And for that reason, as well as taking care of my own, me and my family, I love this topic. I love this topic.
Well, that might be a great place to wrap up this first episode. And listeners, viewers, the whole idea of us doing this podcast, we're not selling you anything. All that we want to do is come alongside you, invite you into some conversation, and ultimately we'll try to give a little bit of our time as we kind of think through all these things. And we're just thrilled that you've joined us. So we look forward to being with you all next time on the Bitcoin Reformation podcast.